We're live.
Don't fall out.
Yes,
Somebody
it's
pushes
open.
me out.
Push you out.
Depends what you have to say.
Well,
Notice delivered.
oh, wow.
Like if someone asks, when someone asks you to move, once it over,
Oh, sorry, we're live. We're live. Thank you, Representative Southworth. All right. Welcome to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It's Wednesday, March 11th at 1 o'clock. And we are getting feedback today from key stakeholders on H727, which is our data center bill. I'm Representative Kathleen James from the Bennington 4 District.
I'm Scott Campbell from St. John's. Chris Morrow, Windsor, Bennington. Michael Southworth, Caledonia, to Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Garrett Torrey, Washington 2.
Graham Kleppner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura's billing a window too.
All right, and joining us in the room,
TJ Poor, Public Service Department.
Annually Perry for the Crossinger.
Julie Walsh, Beaufort.
Johanna Miller from Veteran Services.
Jared Carpenter with Champlain County. Pete Gill, Land Use Review Board.
Candace Morgan, Green Mountain Power.
Sharon Loisel from Electric Power. Finkelstein, Land Use Review Board.
great. So just to bring everybody up to speed, we've been working on this bill for quite some time. We've taken a significant amount of testimony over town meeting break. Rep. Sibilia, as the lead bill sponsor, worked very closely with key stakeholders on the latest draft to make sure that we are advancing a bill that makes sense to everybody. So we do have approaching a final draft. We do have our friends in the Environment Committee taking a drive-by, and they may be sending us some opinions on the bill, and we're going to vote it out on Friday. Period. So we've got a line of witnesses. Do y'all just want to go in order of listed? Okay, great. So Ben and Joey, I don't know if you're.
I actually have sent you an updated witness list.
Yeah.
Some folks have to be out of here a little earlier for other testimony.
Great. Is there a new order?
There's new order. I emailed it to you.
Okay. Well, you guys know who's up.
I'm up.
Okay.
Okay. Candace Morgan, Green Mountain Power. Nice to see you all after the town meeting break. I want to thank everybody for your time and attention on this issue. I know that there are quite a few moving parts and pieces in this bill and touches on a lot of different regulatory structures and other areas of focus. And so I really do appreciate the time that this committee has spent and the feedback that you've been gathering and working with across the board has been helpful to follow as we're all, I think, learning and getting a handle on what this emerging industry might mean for Vermont based on the experience of other states, based on the different parts and pieces moving at the federal level and regional level. And I think this bill is an important path forward in terms of highlighting and creating that framework for if they were to show up in Vermont, what are those things that are important to us? What are the guideposts and the protections that we want to have in place? And I think that this bill does a really good job of establishing that. As I had mentioned when I had testified here with my colleague, Cam, a couple weeks ago, you know, we obviously are in a different regulatory environment than some of the other areas where we have seen data centers emerge, right? And so we do have some protections that are afforded to us by being a fully regulated state and having a lot of the provisions in place already that, you know, are operating under the tenet of the cost causer would pay for those costs. So things are not going to get shifted to other customers. But I think that this bill does helps like really make that clear, and also makes a point in the language around the large load service equity contract piece in particular, helps clarify both what the utility working with any data center would be constructing as part of that, as well as what obviously the PUC would be reviewing whenever they receive one of those contracts to take a look at. So it helps create some good clarity around what are those rules of the road that the data centers or the large load would be operating in with an electric utility. The other piece that I wanted to say is that I know there was a little bit of discussion yesterday, and others might have offer comments on this as well, related to renewables or different types of resources that we want to attach to these service contracts. I think that that's a conversation we're happy to continue to have in the Senate as well. In the meantime, of course, any customer that's served by any utility in Vermont would be, meeting, or that power supply would be met by the terms of the existing renewable energy standards. So that would be what our supply feeding any customer would have as well. But I recognize that there's been some discussion about how we might want to bolster that a little bit more as well for this type of larger load coming online. So we're happy to continue to have those conversations once the bill crosses over in that space. Trying to think of the other main points that I wanted to hit, recognizing that you do have a long list of witnesses.
Well, I don't think we're in a huge hurry. I mean, we'll
Okay.
wait till 3:30.
Yep.
I think Rep. Sebelius has a question. Sure.
When you're done.
Yeah, I can take a question now.
So we have added in here a report on the energy markets, something
Oh, yeah.
that I feel concerned about. And that was kind of a late breaking addition. Do you have any comments on that, both on the appropriateness of the report and the language?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I was going to mention that, or wanted to mention that as well. I think it's a really important report that you're asking for in this space. As I mentioned when I've been here previously, and I think even when the committee met in October before the session, obviously there have been a lot of changes at the federal level and regionally that have impacted, unfortunately, both the cost and availability of new regional resources, which are a key part of the updated renewable energy standard from a couple of years ago. And so I think gathering some information and having that come to the legislature earlier than maybe had been initially envisioned is actually going to be a very important piece of information for folks to have as we are all evaluating in real time what those impacts are and what that means. One thing I just wanted to flag on that specific language that's in here.
And just refer to section 4, right?
Yes, section 4. Yep. On page 15, I think, in the draft that I have. There's a lot of very specific language in there. I think the numbers 1 through 7. I might recommend just kind of keeping it in the part of sub A versus being very prescriptive in what kind of information the PUC is asking folks for, just because they'll determine that, I think, as they ask questions of the utilities and other stakeholders. And, it's whenever you make a list, you always leave something off, right? And so giving them a little bit more of that versus being very prescriptive, I think might be helpful for them as they work through that report and gather that information from stakeholders. So I might recommend striking lines 12 through 21 on page 15.
Okay. And then leaving sub B and C
as is. Yeah, that's right. Those are the main things that I had today. I really do appreciate your work on it and happy to answer any questions that folks have, and I'll be listening from afar and can chime in as well if that's helpful, or stay for a little bit longer. Yeah.
Okay, real quick.
I'm wondering, in addition to your help with this legislation, what GMP is doing internally to prepare for the arrival of a data center application in your territory?
Yeah, absolutely. We spoke a little bit to this when we were here a couple weeks back. And so a couple things. We have been looking at certain parts of our overall service territory in different parts of our system and doing some like stress testing of those areas, adding additional load and seeing what would happen and where it might trigger much more additional investments that would be needed to serve that. So we're evaluating our system overall in that space. We also recently received approval for our 2024 integrated resources plan, and in that order, the Public Utility Commission also asked us to consider this in our next IRP, which will be started very soon as well. So that will be part of that analysis and those engineering studies that we do to complete our IRP. And then in general, you know, anytime a customer, whether it's a data center or a new business or a new residential customer, wants to connect, we do our engineering studies as a matter of practice in that space as well. So anytime there would be something like that showing up, that would be a part of that work in terms of what we would be needing to serve a customer in that space as well. So lots of work on the engineering side of things, I would say, for sure.
Great, thank you.
Any more questions for Candace? Okay,
Thank you all.
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come back and have some comments on the draft as it stands. I want to reiterate what Candace said in terms of this Belco appreciating the committee's time on this bill and the attention to this matter and the stakeholder engagement process that helped inform this bill. That was really helpful to have those conversations. From our perspective, the existing draft largely reinforces and strengthens the existing regulatory and planning processes that we see and provide some additional safeguards for electric grid reliability. So in that context, Belco supports this bill, and we recognize that additional refinements might be appropriate as some federal guidance, as we spoke to last month, as that develops and as we gain a better understanding of what that might look like. So the Federal Energy, just as a reminder, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is considering a potential rulemaking related to large load interconnections. To date, there has been no formal opening of that proceeding, so no action has been taken yet. The U.S. Department of Energy had encouraged FERC to open that proceeding with an April 30th deadline in mind. FERC's not required to meet that deadline, but it has signaled active interest, we'll say, in developing a framework for large load integration. That is something that Belco continues to monitor and coordinate with our state and regional partners. And we'll keep this committee and other committees in the Senate that are taking a look at this bill apprised of any new information or rulemakings that come out in the meantime. So I'll stop there to see if there's any specific questions for Belco.
Yeah, can you remind me, I know you testified about this at the get-go. Can you remind me what the outcome of that, like, what's the point of the rulemaking, or what's the gist there?
Yeah,
of
so
federal-
the Department of Energy had sent a proposed advance notice of proposed rulemaking to FERC, outlining a framework of how data centers, large loads, more of a streamlined process for data centers to be interconnected to the transmission system.
Right.
And they had 14 principles that they were asking FERC to look at, review, and ask for public comment, which they've done through that advance notice of proposed rulemaking process. The next step would be going into a more formal rulemaking process.
And you said the keyword that I heard was streamlined.
And maybe a better term would be building a specific framework for data centers as it doesn't exist to date. And they're really responding to what was seen coming out of the PJM territory.
Right.
That's obviously a very specific example and not necessarily the norm. But because there was so much data center development in that regional transmission operating area, they were seeing certain impacts to both from a reliability and customer ratepayer perspective.
And just so I understand, this is sort of a side issue, but who makes this, who does this rulemaking? Would it be FERC? But what's DOE's involvement? They were requesting rulemaking.
That's right. A little bit unprecedented in terms of how that happened, but FERC is the responsible entity.
Whatever. And,
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It sounded a little more strange. I guess it is a little strange. Like everything on DC. Okay, thank you.
Questions for Velka?
Any, Nat?
Yes.
So, and I'll ask the department this as well, and maybe PhD, any New England, adjacent things that you would want to call our attention to related to this bill? So Commissioner Johnson had talked about coordination amongst the states on, in terms of working with ISO. It's trying to get coordination with the states. I don't know if that's even possible in something like a signing bill because our
Right.
policies are so different.
Well, when I think about the coordination among the states through ISO's perspective, we're looking at the bulk electric system. And so if Velco were to make any specific standards for large load interconnection,
Yeah.
we'd be looking towards ISO to see what what changes they would be making in their own planning processes. And we would likely follow suit with whatever changes they were to make to their planning, because their plans inform our plans. And so we need those to be aligned.
Okay, and our large load contract language provides room for,
I think so. Yes, yes.
thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, welcome.
Pete Gill, Executive Director for the Land Use Review Board. Thanks for the opportunity to come back and talk with you all. And with me,
Brooke Dingledine, a member of the Land Use Review Board.
Great.
so I think we will be brief. There's one section in the bill, section 2, and I'll just say I'm working off of the 1.1 ninth version here. So I think I've got what I need here, but I know there's an updated version.
I think 1.2 is pretty different.
It's pretty different. Okay.
Yeah, let's make sure that you are looking at the right draft.
Yeah, let's go.
Huh? And maybe that hasn't changed, but I want to make sure. So we're in draft.
I think I gave you 1.2.
Yeah, 1.2.
Oh,
Thank you.
good. Okay.
Yeah. That's great. So let's see, just wanna section
Changes to your section.
to that section. Yeah, so
Okay, phew.
as the committee will remember that, yeah, I see it now here on page 14 of your draft.
Okay.
And so, as the committee will recall, you all asked us for specific language in terms of filling some of the gaps between, our review process and, this process. We supplied that language. I see it there in section 2
Great.
that would, from our understanding, fill that gap, meaning that where there was a data center that might not otherwise trigger under the existing system of jurisdictional triggers for Act 250, given its the megawatt threshold in this bill would also trigger Act 250 review. So again, this section here in section 2 would fulfill that gap as it's there. It would provide review under all of the criteria for Act 250, which we've gone through with this committee previously. It would also provide the public outreach and process that Act 250 fulfills within its role that we have also gone through with the committee. So really, I don't have anything else really prepared that way, but happy to take any questions you all might have.
So just 2 items to ask you to expand on with regard to Act 250. One I received from Vermonters concerned about this around noise and how that might be addressed with Act 250. And the other, just this committee is deeply interested in the water issues. And so if you can just speak specifically to water with Act 250.
Yep. So first, in terms of noise, criterion 8, aesthetics would deal with noise that is just colloquially, annoying, has impacts on the aesthetics of the area. Criterion 1, air pollution, if there is something that is a health hazard, it would address those under that criteria.
Noise.
Noise, yes. Yes.
So noise and criteria.
It would be both of those criteria. Again, under criterion 8 aesthetics, it would be kind of that aesthetic impacts from those noises versus criterion 1, where there's health impacts that are resulting from those noises would be addressed under that. In terms of water impacts, there's a host of water issues under criterion 1 and subcriteria within that. That would be addressed under that criteria. Ultimately, it's no undue impact from that project on water.
And existing water supplies. So if there are neighboring wells, and there is going to be a significant drawdown of an aquifer or a water supply, often pump tests are required so that it can be demonstrated that the neighboring folks will not be impacted, or if so, there will be a mechanism to determine either a diminution in the quality or quantity. So we have, those kinds of conditions that make sure to create the safeguards so that if those impacts do occur, we're aware of them and there's a way to mitigate them.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm wondering about what we heard yesterday from Michael Grady about what was this term? Basically high quality water.
Oh, yeah, that was on page,
Probably not find it, but you can see it.
I can see it in my mind. Okay. Page 6 at the bottom, line 18, outstanding resource waters.
Yes. Which seemed to apply to it sounded like a relatively small fraction of the waters of the state. But what I think, what I just heard you, Brooke say was concerned about neighboring wells, for example, and so that might be, I don't know whether that is a well is considered high outstanding water resource water because it's somebody's drinking water. Maybe it is, but
Yeah, it wouldn't be, there's a special designation for that, but the impacts from the withdrawals, as Brooke was saying, would be considered under Act 250 under criterion 1.
Yeah,
That line-
stormwater
that
and-
broadens the percentage of the water that are encompassed in that 250 review. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there are different criteria regarding water impacts to water. So for example, we have stormwater runoff provisions, a criteria to make sure that the construction on the land does not cause runoff that would impair those kinds of waters that you're referring to. But we don't have, I'm not aware of that designation for particular waters as being unique or within a criteria of Act 250 specifically.
Well, this is
It would be
added
considered.
language. Yeah.
Right. It would be added language. Which actually brings up, if I might just make one point that I wanted to just be sure that the committee was aware of. And I have not followed this bill closely. So forgive me if I'm indicating something that you're already aware of, but the Public Utility Commission review does incorporate most of the Act 250 criteria in it. Basically like criteria 1 through 9F. And so the only thing I just want to raise is if we are triggering Act 250 jurisdiction and the PUC is doing their reviews, it's different. Okay,
Yeah.
very
PUC
good.
got involved in that.
Very good. I'm sorry if I
That's
didn't
okay.
know about that. I
We-
just wanted to be
We
sure. was
changed
understood.
it, so that these projects now would be falling under Act 250 instead of pursuing a certificate of public good from the PUC. So right, you wanna say something? Okay.
So to that, we have, actually, Ledge Council has asked us if we want to continue to include on page 6,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about.
sub 3, so 1 through 9, 1 through 8.
Line 5.
Well, 1 through 8, I'm wondering if,
So from
Because that's under the
page 5
PUC, that's under the PUC review. Currently as this is drafted, and that's, I think, what Brooke was alluding to. And it seems to still be in this draft on page 6, line 5.
right,
Yeah, the reference 6086A 1 through 8 and 9K. That's Act 250 criteria 1 through 8 and 9K.
okay, so that is line 5
Right.
as a potential.
Yeah, so the intent was not to have the PUC doing that, the review of those criteria when Act 250 was also being triggered, then you would want to remove that and have some mechanism that they would let's see how that would work. I guess you would need to remove it if you had Act 250 involved in that particular project.
and
And the language continues impacts to climatic soils, which is 9B,
Yeah,
criterion 9B. So that would be covered as well. And then there is mention of community noise levels, which is covered by criterion 8 and 1, as Pete mentioned. Greenhouse gas emissions is not covered by Act 250. That is solely a PUC. Well,
It depends on where you're gonna go with that, but it could be under criterion 9F.
it could be air pollution,
So,
Yeah,
or it could be air pollution, but there is no language specific to the greenhouse gas emissions language in Act 250.
okay,
well, all of this, just want to
Yeah.
make one point here. All of these things are required in the contract. The large load reference called large load contracts. So I think that's it's not that the commission is reviewing that, it's just stipulating that the contract needs to cover these things. So in that sense, should they be removed?
well, it's due consideration having been given to the criteria.
Well, maybe, yeah, but I'm going back to the previous page.
So on page 5, line 9.
Yes, the
Yeah.
Park Commission approves a large load service equity contract. The commission shall find the proposed data center including any upgrade. Yeah, it seems like there's some missing words here. This addresses these items. It seems like is what it's trying to say.
So, sorry, I just need to understand here. So 10 VSA 1424 outstanding resource waters, that is not Act 250.
That would be covered by Act 250 under the
is.
water more broadly, so it wouldn't be so as specific as that. That's kind of a
Okay.
more specific drill down on
And then
water types.
86, 1 through 8, the 9, saying those are the Act 250 criteria.
Yeah.
And then 10 VSA 6001, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
That would be
is-
9B under Act 250 criteria.
Okay,
So that was one of the criteria under the current regime of PUC review that is not included in their review. And it's separately listed here. In slightly different terms.
Yeah, let me just suggest this. If we back up and we look at this entire paragraph, and this is the laundry list of the project shouldn't adversely affect these things. And in number 3, will not have an undue adverse effect on aesthetics. That's criterion 8. In the Act 250. Historic sites, that's criterion 8. Air and water purity, that's criterion 1. The natural environment is covered by a number of criteria. So the language that the PUC had when this statutory language was created for their reviews borrowed a lot of the concepts of Act 250 into it, including specific language and then referencing 6086A1 through 8 and 9K. Perhaps it would be best to, because if you're trying to avoid duplicative, considerations by Act 250 as well as the PUC, maybe a more comprehensive rewrite of this little section could happen. That would ensure that you are clear on the land use review aspects and criteria of Act 250 that are covered. And if you want to add to that, fine, but the PUC language is very duplicative. What ultimately is analyzed and determined under Act 250 in this section.
it is in the 248 process, but this is a that's we're not doing. So because 248 is not going to be involved here, I think what we're trying to make sure is that the contract that the PUC is developing and reviewing with these between the utility and the data center includes these things. So I'm not really comfortable actually just saying like, oh, 250 will take care of that. I want to see it thought about in the contract too. So
Yeah,
if we
and
just strike it-
apologies for not having the updated draft, but I think that it hinges somewhere in terms of page 5, line 9 about what the commission is going to be, what the impact of these enumerated items 1, 2, and then going on the next page 3 is the one that we're talking about.
Yep.
4, 5. So it depends on what the impact of that is on the contract. And again, apologies for not having my head around exactly how that works. It sounds like you're ensuring that the contract
Yes.
would include those things.
Yep.
But then separate from that, the Act 250 review would occur.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So-
again, I think that there's words missing here from this section D. It should say something like addresses these items are covered or something like that.
Sure, I'm sorry that I did not review this particular one either before I got the wrong we were looking at the wrong version, so I
Yeah.
apologize.
That's okay. So it says, yeah, before they approve a contract, they shall find that. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these are the things that they need to make sure are included and covered in the contract.
Okay, should find that.
But I think Scott's right, that there are a couple words missing. The commission shall find that the contract for the proposed data center.
Oh, right.
Yeah, something like that.
It's,
Yeah.
I mean, before the commission approves a large load service equity contract.
They need to make sure the contract includes all this stuff.
No, because the numbers are about the data center. Shall find that the data center does not affect, will result in an economic benefit, will not have an adverse impact. We're talking about the center. So they're reviewing the contract and they need to make sure that that the center won't do this, or that. Right.
But that's in the contract, right? I don't know.
I don't know.
We should have Maria in here talking about that.
Perfect.
And we're happy to review that language and provide you with some feedback on that, down the road too. I know you're trying to get this voted out, Friday?
Yeah.
So,
Not trying to.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Do
But
not
did
try.
want to
Do.
flag that and get a better understanding where you're coming from. I think we understand that piece. I did want to just flag that the language on greenhouse gas emissions that is parallels Act 250's 9F language as well.
Whoops, I'm sorry, I
There's
gave you
no
the wrong
worries.
info on
Just
that
wanted
one.
to, clear the record there. But yeah, again, we're happy to look at this a little bit more and provide you some feedback that's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just at page 5, line 11, where it says the commission shall find that you were just discussing. That was the only piece that threw me for a loop because it sounded like you had to figure out the answer, not that it would just be in.
It looks like they're reviewing it. Yeah.
So I agree, maybe the language. So we'll get back to you if we can
Okay.
give you a suggestion on that.
Great.
The draft insurance
Right.
to be used.
All right. Thank you so much.
Great.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Morning, afternoon, sorry. For the record, Ben and Julie Waltz of Deepburg, again, here on 727. Mostly here today, to let you know that I think that Vermont's gonna be better off, if a data center comes to the state with this bill than without it. Really appreciate the committee's hard work on this. And, I'll cop to, I had a lot of conversations this fall, essentially saying, feels like we're at least a few years off, right? Like they're looking at other places first and we gotta get our, ducks in a row. We gotta get our house in order. But like, I was not feeling the urgency quite as much, as perhaps I should have been. And I think the testimony that this committee took really, brought that urgency to light. And so really glad that this legislation is on its way. Wanted to mention a few things, a number of witnesses have mentioned and representatives have mentioned the possibility of additional work in the Senate. So I want to touch on a few things that we still have an eye on, just so there's no surprises if, we're suggesting additional language over downstairs, as it were. And then touch on one change that you made in this most recent draft. And then I'll just, since I happen to be going after your last witness, share a quick thought on the conversation you just had on the provision about what the PUC needs to sort of make sure is happening before they approve the contract. So the 3 provisions that I wanted to mention that we still have an eye on. One, the sort of bring your own power concept, which obviously is not incorporated into this bill. as Green on Power testified to a minute ago, obviously the renewable energy standard is law. You don't need to reiterate the fact that it's law in a new law for that to continue to be true. And if this, it would be covered by this. The possibility of this, data center being a self-managed utility, I think adds like a little bit of a question mark there that we may want to look at in the Senate. But, primarily, you all passed a very good renewable energy standard a couple of years ago, and that sets this potential large load or any other new ratepayer up to be a part of moving the state and the region towards renewables. Two, the bill has, I think, some very strong and provisions that were made stronger through this process. Protections around affordability and any impact on ratepayers as it relates to strain on the grid, resilience and reliability of the grid, and any increase in peak that a data center could cause. That being said, I think there could be some additional benefit, as I mentioned in my testimony, to tightening up language around peak in particular. But the core thing that you want to do, ensure that ratepayers are not negatively impacted by an increase in peak. I think this bill does quite well. The language is quite strong in that regard. And then the last piece that I wanted to mention in terms of things that we still have an eye on, I mentioned very briefly in my testimony. We've looked into it a little bit more since then, wanting to really vet this idea of relying exclusively and solely on contracts to enforce all of the very strong provisions that you have in this bill. The original bill obviously included a tariff construct. Rulemaking is also a possibility. Either of those would be a much more public process than a contract that's negotiated amongst private parties, even when one of those private parties is a regulated utility and the contract itself is has to be approved by a public entity and the Public Utilities Commission. A contract is sort of inherently less transparent. And so we want to spend a little bit more time understanding the PUC and the department's position and why they felt like that was the right way to go here. And, if there's any additional refinement that could be done on that front, or, transparency that could be brought to that process. Last thing that I'll mention in terms of what's in the bill is the provisions around efficiency utilities and not allowing these potential data centers to participate in the SMEAT program or the energy savings account or the customer credit program. These are all programs that exist under current law that allow larger power consumers to operate sort of adjacent to, outside of the standard efficiency utility process that most ratepayers have to participate in. Just pay your efficiency charge and then get benefits from the fact that we have a great efficiency utility doing great work. So really requiring them to stay in that standard lane unless and until they choose to come to the legislature and make the case that they are in some way different and should have some sort of a different program, the way that Global Foundries and IBM before them did. So I think that was a very good improvement to the bill. I really appreciate your adding.
Question about that, Ben.
Yeah.
So how the construct we have here is that they work with Efficiency Vermont on the design of the building. They pay their efficiency charges just like everybody does. They cannot participate in these kind of existing programs that we have for kind of larger power consumers. And can you remind me, so what we left sort of open in a way is the thought that they could become a self-managed utility. And can you remind me how that process works? Does that have to come to the legislature? I've not been involved with that.
It does not. You could hear, and I know you're hearing from the department in a minute, you could hear from them as well. I think process is perhaps a bit strong. It's something that Global Foundries decided they wanted to do. There's a provision in law, which I could pull up quickly, but don't have the citation off the top of my head, that essentially says if you want to pull out of being a customer with existing utility, there's a process for that. And then there's process essentially to create a new utility, which obviously doesn't happen very often. The concern there and what happened with Global Foundries is they initially made the case that because of the wording in a lot of different Vermont statutes, they were sort of a special case, and as their own utility wouldn't have to comply with things like the renewable energy standard. Obviously, we and many others had a lot of concerns on that, and ultimately, amicable agreement was found, sort of arrived at. I don't want to over characterize that, but it landed in a place where they are continuing to basically play by the same rules with some provisions that are customized to their more special case. And there's a specific, as with all the other utilities, sort of lane that they live in the renewable energy standard, and they were part of the negotiations around creating that and all that.
I think it's a PUC application.
Yes, they would all have to go through the PUC. So the reason we have our eye on that is, Vermont statute really isn't crafted with a utility that is its only customer, is itself its only customer in mind. And so there's a lot of terms like retail electric provider that are perhaps not really descriptive of that kind of special case. Again, this would have to go through the PUC. This is also something that can be looked at in the Senate. And, I will say, I don't think the language that we brought initially, which just would out and out ban that kind of construct, is the only way of addressing this. I think you could also put some strong parameters around that in a way that allowed it as a possibility, but with fewer question marks than currently exists. No, that's what I have to say about that one.
So the language that we have here doesn't pretty much ban that scenario. Seems like it's pretty.
No, there's two self-managed things that are coming up, and they're completely different. There's the self-managed energy efficiency program, SMEEP, which is addressed in that, and it very clearly does say a new data center can't participate in SMEEP. That is the efficiency program that was created for IBM, and now, and that sort of carried forward to Global Foundries, and essentially says like, hey, you're so big, you get to do your own efficiency thing. You don't have to do this standard efficiency thing. The construct we were just talking about is a self-managed utility, which would have some impacts on how they operate as it relates to efficiency, but is really about, we don't actually want to be served by one of the utilities that's already in Vermont. We just want to have our own power contract, be our utility, and provide ourselves our own power.
We do say here, a data center shall be served by an electric utility company pursuant to the contract approved by the PUC.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem like there's a lot of wiggle room to do a self-managed utility.
I think the argument would be, and perhaps there's some gray area there, and you could certainly hear from council on this, but if they became a utility, then they would be served by utilities by serving themselves. I think you could argue, a data center company could argue that is a possibility. Now we might dispute that at the PUC, but I think there certainly could be a debate about it.
I stay interested. I have another question about something you said previously. Do you want to finish this?
I think we're done. I mean, I'm done talking about that.
Okay.
David, questions about it?
The transparency. Is there, if the contract is automatically to be approved by the PUC, does that make it a public document or not?
I am not going to offer an opinion on that. I'm not an attorney, and I don't have enough expertise in that area to say for sure.
But yeah, we should find out.
That's
We get to
That's
that.
coming in.
Yes. Okay. Good.
So the last thing I wanted to speak to, which I hadn't been planning on saying anything about, but since you had such a good conversation about it's page 5, no, page, yeah, 5, line 9 and onward, each sub D. It's just a couple of thoughts on that. One, broadly, I think having the P, I mean, you talked a lot about Act 250 just now, because obviously you had experts on Act 250 in the chair. There are other provisions down here that are covered by other parts of law. I would just, as a broad principle, say, I think having the PUC do its due diligence to sort of double check to make sure like all our bases are covered makes a lot of sense. I also think, something like the language, that Representatives Kimball or Putner brought up, or something like the contract includes, shall ensure the contract includes provisions necessary to, and basically something that right now the language says they need to, before approving the contract, they need to like double check that all this stuff is happening. But it doesn't actually say anything about the contract itself needs to make sure any of that's happening. And so I think there could be more of a tie there. I don't think there has to be. The PUC just double checking all that stuff before it signs off on the contract is still good. But I think you could have the PUC also, as part of that process, say, hey, it looks like actually we need another provision in the contract because like sub 3 isn't quite covered by other things. So just a thought.
Is that what you guys are all saying?
Yeah.
Well, yes, I think that's the intent.
I don't think I was quite cluing in. So
The
let's
question is,
talk about this.
the intent to have all this stuff in the contract,
Oh,
or is it to have all this stuff be stuff the PUC has to check before approving the contract, which may not include all this stuff?
I don't know.
Yeah, I understood.
Okay, I didn't understand that.
I understood that this was a list of things that the PUC was stipulated should be in the contract.
And if that's the case, then we should rewrite the language a little bit.
Yeah. Not that they're reviewing all this stuff necessarily, but as part of their approval process, they would check to see if these items are addressed
In the
in
contract.
the contract, but
More explicit.
yeah.
Sorry, guys, I wasn't.
There's a missing verb or something in this paragraph that needs to be added. We need to talk to Maria about it.
If I may, and then I'll thank you one more time and exit safe left. I am struck by the fact that this provision immediately follows another provision that says is basically a list of things that need to be in the contract. So it seems a little odd to have two lists in a row that are like things that need to be in the contract. The way I had
Where's the other list?
well, the first page 2, line 9, large load service contract approval, and then page 3 at the top, the large load service equity contract shall. And then that's all the things the contract needs to do is accomplish. So I guess the way I heard the conversation was perhaps a little bit between the two interpretations, which is to say the PUC could double check all that, and most of it is not in the contract because Act 250 is covering it or something else covering it. But perhaps they find there are a few things that are a few bases that are not covered, a few sort of gaps that are in that second list that perhaps there should be a provision in the contract around. But like if something's covered by Act 250, stopping into additional line in the contract may not be necessary. Again, I'm out over my skis a little bit here, but I just wanted to offer that as a thought.
That these are good Maria questions, I think, because you're right. What we have here is a first list of things that PUC needs to guarantee are in the contract. And then we have a second list that seems to be things that they're just going to review and make sure are sort of happening or in place. So,
In order to get the approval.
in order to get deeper. Okay, Greg has arrived, so that's good. Okay.
I apologize if I stirred the pot more than I intended to. I mostly just really appreciate this committee's work on this. And like I said, this bill passes. with improvements or without improvements, Vermont's gonna be better for it if one of these things comes in. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ben.
Everyone? Okay, great. Um, well, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Johanna Miller. I lead the Energy and Climate Program at the Vermont Natural Resources Council. In a moment, you're going to hear from my colleague, John Groveman, who's going to speak more to the water, the PFAS, and potentially the land use provisions of the bill. But first, I just really wanted to start first with echoing, I think, some of the appreciation for the work you've been doing and how important this bill is in this moment. VNRC, is a part of a national affiliation of nonprofit peer groups like mine. I was on a call last night. There are over 30 states in that affiliation, and I was in a breakout group about data centers. And I can tell you that Vermont has not had one of these yet, but implications on the ground and some of the exposure and risks and issues that are coming forward makes me so grateful for the work that you're doing in this moment proactively to get out in front of it, to say if these large load facilities come to serve a purpose and a benefit to the state of Vermont, then we're going to do so with some parameters in place, because these are being built in an astonishing speed, and they're having huge impacts and driving rate increases, water withdrawal issues. The PFAS and the toxic chemical pollution piece of it is significant. And these facilities also have the potential to fundamentally undercut or drown out our emissions reductions progress if we don't do it right. And I'm grateful for the framework you have in this current draft that says we're going to do it right. And we're going to get out in front of that. So I just want to say, from where I sit, this draft is meeting multiple goals that VNRC has, which includes proactively protecting Vermont ratepayers from potential negative impacts from data centers, again, including potential cost increases. Again, with the goal of, and I think, more work to do, and I want to echo some of the things that Ben mentioned, but maybe a little bit tightening up of ensuring that if a data center does come here, that it is not accelerating climate pollution, but we are encouraging them, requiring them to participate in our efficiency programs and making sure that they are not driving up pollution and instead being a partner in the progress that we need. And you're going to hear from John, my colleague, in just a moment about, making sure that data center protections safeguard water resources and don't, through the, significant use of PFAS in a lot of these facilities, have forever chemicals leaking into our waterways and potentially more. So I just want to mostly say thank you for the work that you've been doing. And Ben highlighted a few of the issues that we too might want to work on in the Senate in collaboration with the stakeholders you've been hearing from or already heard from today. So I just want to underscore that those are the things that we'll be continuing to work on. But mostly, again, this is a really important framework. I'm grateful for you're doing it. I'm grateful for you advancing it into the next chamber, and look forward to working with you all and others on it. And I want to defer to John to go much more deeply as our water policy program director on the water issues and on the toxic chemical issues. And I don't know if John wants to speak to the land use issues as a former Act 250 expert. So that's all I really wanted to say, is just so many thanks for the work you've been doing. You've got great provisions in here, and there are a few other things we all too might want to work on.
Great.
That's it.
Questions for Joey?
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Joey.
John, online.
Well, actually, Madam Chair, John had to jump off at 2.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
He didn't tell me that.
No, he just, so he had a conflict. But I can answer a lot of the questions. I'm not the LURB, the PFAS expert that Don is, but that discussion did happen this morning also in House Environment. So there's others been talking about it. For the record, my name is Jared Carpenter of the Lake Champlain Committee, Clean Water Advocate. I've worked on water issues in this building for 11-ish years. We think this bill is a great start. We think it offers great protections. Obviously, with data centers and the amount of water that they can withdraw, you're only going to get them from a few sources if you're using an open loop cooling system. Lower Connecticut River, where Vermont Yankee was, Lake Champlain, Lake Memphremagog, maybe Lost Pond, but obviously you're going to need big bodies of water if you're using an open loop system. So thus the concern of Lake Champlain Committee. I wanted to answer one question before I forget and get to the bill. So outstanding resource waters.
Oh, yeah.
Outstanding resource waters are defined as waters of the state designated by the Secretary of ANR as having exceptional natural, recreational, cultural, or scenic values, which is very vague. But there are, in the process, is a list of criteria under which a water can be nominated to be an ORW. It has to go through rulemaking process, public process of that nature. And I had to phone a friend at DEC to ask how many there were because I had forgotten. There are 4. They are listed in the Vermont Water Quality Standards in the back. It is portions of the Bat and Kill River in the towns of East Dorset and Arlington, Pikes Falls and Bald Mountain, the town of Jamaica, a portion of it, the North Branch, the Pulteney River, some lower portions of the Pulteney River, and then Great Falls on the Pompanusic as well. Most of these were designated years ago, and this is something actually the water advocates have had an issue with for a while. Is there's a lot of qualified waters that we think could be qualified as outstanding resource waters for a variety of issues, be they water quality or scenic value or things of that nature. It is an arduous process to go through the rulemaking to get it done. So outstanding resource waters, it's interesting how it's referenced, but when you look at the Vermont Water Quality Standards, I won't get into the details of it, but waters are classified as A1, A2, B1, and B2 waters. Outstanding resource waters are sort of a separate part. The vast majority of the waters in the state are B2. B1 waters are generally for aquatic biota, maybe fish. A2 waters are waters that have certain values that are used for drinking water sources. And A1 waters are the pristine waters of the state. They're usually headwaters, mountain lakes, things of that nature. I don't have any examples off the top of my head. But when you discharge into various waters under the Vermont Water Quality Standards, you can only impair the water a certain amount. For example, a B2 water and thermal discharge, I think it's you can only impair the water by an extra 2 degrees. And I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I might be a little wrong, but that gives sort of a picture on how water quality standards generally fit into all of this in discharge. Under Vermont Water Quality Standards, there are criteria for all sorts of pollutants, lead, arsenic, aluminum, you name it, and set by the EPA standards, and you cannot allow discharge to get above a certain level depending on the classification of water. So that's sort of a quick primer on how the water quality standards work. And ORWs are something that are important, but they are very, very few and very far.
It sounds like really this, if we're going to call out any particular waters, it ought to be A1, 2, or B1 or 2.
Correct. Well, we do.
Because it doesn't really.
Well,
it doesn't really affect many.
True, but I think it's just in terms of what the PUC looks at is an outstanding water. But if you get into, John and I came in and testified, and if you look at starting on the line 15 of page 9 are the water standards in general. And I think they very adequately cover all the bases that you're looking for in terms of water, not only protection of water quality, but water quantity.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense then to even call out outstanding water.
Yeah, that's not an area of the law I'm all that familiar with. So
nor are we.
So if you do go to page 9, it is the definitions. When Michael Grady was here yesterday.
Yeah.
5 years ago. Seems like 5 years ago. It was yesterday. When Mike was here yesterday, he did, obviously, as he always does, a great job walking through the fortunes of this. And I will go through and highlight some of them. not with the definitions, but the definitions are important. But if you start on page 10, line 16, there's been some conversations here about the various cooling systems. An open loop cooling system, on average, from what I've been reading, 300,000 gallons a day, loses 80% of the water to evaporation. So you're talking a lot of water in and a lot of water going up. And then I'm assuming the remainder of that is probably warm discharge, thermal discharge that would go back into the water body as it takes more water out. The language here requires as a preference that the data center use a closed loop system. There are various other ways to cool, but it's my understanding is you have to take the water from somewhere first, but that rather than the water evaporating, you capture it and it is used continuously in the system. I would think that the water would have to be replenished a little bit from time to time because you are going to lose some of it to leaks and other things of that nature. I think you can use a coolant similar to like your air conditioner or your radiator in the car. I've heard air conditioning can be used to cool the systems. I've also read that the energy use goes through the ceiling if you're going to use an air conditioner. So water does make the most sense and a closed loop system does make the most sense after that. However, if a closed loop system is not feasible as determined by the district commission, there's a number of other provisions in here that would provide the protection you're looking for. In C, you have to obtain a groundwater. If you're going to use groundwater, you have to obtain a groundwater withdrawal permit. The threshold for this, and Mike explained it yesterday much better than I could, is 57,600 gallons of water would be the trigger for the permit. This language here would waive that, so any groundwater withdrawal would require the permit. Groundwater withdrawals permits are required for pretty much any business entity that uses over 57.6. So this isn't something special. If you are going to withdraw the water from surface water, you would have to get a surface water withdrawal permit. As Mike did indicate, that is going to start undergoing rulemaking this summer. So those permits don't exist yet. This body passed the bill to protect surface water withdrawals 3 years ago. And the Agency of Natural Resources, DEC, has been spending the last 2.5 collecting data on various users of water withdrawals. Folks will have to, after this goes into effect, folks will have to go get a surface water withdrawal permit. Agriculture does not. Is my recollection. The reason being is that agriculture often does not use ground surface water for irrigation. They prefer the sky. And it's just under the rare circumstances where they have to, like last summer, they have to go in and get surface water. Under a drought conditions, under this provision, the data center would have to cease withdrawal. I think that's something that we would talk about during rulemaking, exactly what those criteria would be. Can you imagine last summer in Lake Champlain or the Connecticut River and we're under a drought and something like this is drawing water off, even on the closed loop system? It could have a major impact on our water quality and quantity. And same thing with groundwater. A lot of people's wells ran dry. Can you imagine if one of these things was drawing off of a groundwater system in your community? I mean, they would really exacerbate the issue. So we think those are two very important provisions. I'll take a breath if folks have questions, and then I can keep going.
Questions now?
I'm just double checking.
Mhm.
You're not highlighting concerns.
No, I'm highlighting complete support for all of us. Thank you for making it clear. For asking it.
Yeah.
We think these provisions are fantastic. We're in favor of all of them. We have no suggested change. So I'm just highlighting some of the provisions and why these are important. The provision E is that obviously if you have to obtain all of your water quality permits, you'd have to get a stormwater permit and a NIPD's discharge permit and everything that would apply to other businesses as well. Top of page 12, number 2. Michael Grady yesterday did talk about the water quality certificate. Normally that is a trigger under federal regulations. It's Clean Water Act Section 401. If you need a FERC permit or an Army Corps permit or some other federal permit that would trigger 401, you would need a water quality certificate. Require having the state do one for a data center is a bit unique. We think the conditions with the data center are a bit unique. So what a water quality certificate does outside of your regular permit conditions, it allows A&R to ask other questions and have studies done on impacts on erosion, wetlands, endangered species, aquatic biota, other water uses taking into account. It really allows a comprehensive analysis and a whole impact of a whole look at the water usage rather than just whether or not you're discharging a pollutant into a water above a certain level. So it really gives you a comprehensive look of what would happen. Yeah, they can be a little. You have to do a fair amount of studies sometimes to justify it, but we think it's completely well worth it, especially in this scenario. And then the final one, F, is in regards to the PFAS. There aren't any, my understanding is there aren't any current standards for surface water. This is linked to, if you go back to the definition, this is linked to the EPA standard. I know, Madam Chair, you had some concerns about EPA, and that the standards could change. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, the House Environment Committee is looking to link it to the current EPA standard. So if the EPA standard moved, this wouldn't.
Great. Because we had talked about that for the Clean Water Act as well.
And that would be the Vermont Water Quality Standards. Under the Clean Water Act, we're required every 3 years to update our Vermont Water Quality Standards. And so even if the Clean Water Act moved, Vermont Water Quality Standards wouldn't. And ours are actually more they are more stringent in areas than the Clean Water Act. So
Okay, so I want to understand two different things here. So line 4.
On 12.
On page 12, yep. So we're linking there to the Federal Clean Water Act. And we had talked yesterday about backdating it.
Sure.
Basically like picking a date.
I think Maria's doing that.
And Maria was working on that. Were you suggesting?
That's a great Michael Grady question. No, I think I think
Okay.
that sounds like a good idea. Very much a belt and suspenders, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we would just say the Federal Clean Water Act as of some safe date.
Yeah.
And then I was really worried, I am really worried about linking our PFAS standards to the EPA. And you suggested there something.
I think the House Environment Committee is looking to do the same thing with the EPA standard as you were talking about using the clean water, like linking it to a certain point in time. So if going forward, if standards have changed, we have some insulation. That's happening actually it's happening in a lot of statutes and a lot of bills in this building right now in terms of linking, because a lot of our state standards are linked to federal standards by reference. So if you start changing the reference and suddenly it starts undermining all sorts of things. So I think that's being done in a fair amount of points in the building. And even, so I think that's a warranted action to take.
All right, so we could take the same approach there.
But all in all, I think these are great standards. We're very much in support of. We've talked about it with the environmental advocate community, that soup of BNRC, Conservation Law Foundation, Connecticut Urban Conservancy, Nature Conservancy, and others who work on water issues. And people are supportive. I can comfortably say that folks are supportive of these.
So I have one clarifying question about still on page 12, section 2, the top of the page. So I thought you said that this is a requirement that the state do something that it doesn't ordinarily do. Is issuing a water quality certificate what you're talking about?
Yes, the state does it, but it's part of a federal permit. It's incorporated as part of the federal permit. So what happens for a lot of them is hydropower, dam operations. They obviously have to get a license through FERC. It's usually a 30 or 40-year license. And in order to get the FERC license, one of the things they need to get is a 401, which is run by DEC. And DEC takes that, like you have to have this amount of minimum discharge to satisfy certain water quality standards and aquatic biota, and there's a weighted usable habitat and all sorts of factors that go in. And then the 401 factors are incorporated into the federal license. And that's been litigated for a long time. The courts have held all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken, that 401, state 401 water quality certificates must be part of the federal permit. So it's asking the state to do the same thing, even though there's no federal permit to roll it in. Okay. Theoretically, there could be if there's.
I was just trying to understand.
If there's like an Army Corps permit they would need for a 404 dredge and fill or something like that, that would necessarily trigger it. But it also, in some circumstances, they might not trigger any federal requirements. It might just be a state requirement.
Okay. So it's telling data centers to go through a section of federal standards that ordinarily they wouldn't have to go through.
It's to go through the process that it normally wouldn't go through, to do the same conditions to find out the same factors as used to regain a water quality.
I think I understand now.
Okay, I'm sorry if I didn't explain it all that stuff.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I didn't understand what I said. So
we are plumbing the depths of water law. Exactly, so that's all for me, Madam Chair.
Great. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the time, and obviously you've all seen me. I'm around. Flag me down if you have any other questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You didn't fall out the window yet, Jerry.
Push, I kept my mouth shut.
See?
For the record, TJ Poor, Public Service Department. I want to join the chorus of thanking you for the opportunity to collaborate on this bill. A lot of testimony and discussion around data centers has been kind of in a negative context, and I think there is opportunity for a data center to actually bring potential benefits to particularly Vermont ratepayers, but only if there's appropriate guardrails on how they're developed. And I testified previously, and again, think that our current regulatory rubric is pretty strong between Act 250 and Title 30, Section 248, and other PUC regulatory jurisdiction over utilities and load. But this bill improves that. It provides more clarity to ensure that benefits are on that ratepayers are unharmed by a data center, mitigating risks, I think, largely completely to ratepayers, and still providing opportunity to maximize benefits. So I think this is a really good step in the right direction. And I don't think the bill is quite perfect yet. There's a couple areas that I think that could continue to be improved. But even I look forward to working with folks in the Senate to do that. I think I would recommend, as far as it relates to the large load service equity contract, passing that language, which is the language that I have expertise on, I think, and hammering out some of the last details in the Senate side. Just to one specific area for improvement is to just continue, and you all talked about it, to clarify the distinction between Act 250 and PUC jurisdiction on land use matters. The way I read that language, that page 5 that you all were discussing earlier, is that if I was the PUC, I think what I would do is say, do you have an Act 250 permit? Yes. Then that qualifies and that provision is met. And so, and I think that is okay. I also think you could take out that language because they need to have an Act 250 permit. So it's kind of another thing that the commission kind of opines on, but it doesn't really, I don't know what additional protections it provides.
The one exception to that is the last line of that paragraph on greenhouse gas emissions, and I would recommend that one stay, that piece of it stay, because it's, as land use review board said, that isn't explicitly articulated in Act 250 in the same way it is in the bill.
I have a question. This will probably be a PUC question also, but so just trying to think about how this is gonna, how this could actually play out. Like, do you think what will come first, the Act 250 permit or the contract?
It's a good question. I actually don't know. I think they would probably proceed in parallel with it. I'm not sure. I think,
Because I'm not sure what you said about, do you have your Act 250 permit? Great. That actually makes sense to me, because I don't know why one of these, I don't know why you'd want to sign a contract if you don't have your Act 250 permit first.
yeah, I think.
I mean, that just seems like a real.
Yeah, the other thing the PUC could do in that respect is say, this is, it can approve conditional on it receiving the Act 250 permit. Be the other way.
Okay.
So,
Does it make sense to include the permit language in the contract to require the permit to be attached to the contract somehow?
I mean, I don't think it does, especially not in the contract specifically. I mean, the contract is between the utility and the data center, so that having the permit be a part of that contract doesn't, I don't think so.
Well, I mean, I just definitely advocate if they somehow the data center ran afoul of its Act 250 permit, then that would be a breach of contract as well.
Very true. I think this is a few years ago now, but when I was doing power supply contracts myself, that there was always provisions in them for like the merchant developer needed to have like their permits in place, and if they didn't, it was out. So maybe it is okay. You're stoking my memory of these contracts from years ago, but
I don't know the answer. I'm just asking you.
Yeah, it could be a way. I think it could. I think you get to the same result with just requiring an Act 250 permit and requiring this large load service equity contract. And instead of listing out each individual item, if you said, just it has to have the Act 250 permit, that might be a simpler way to.
Well, in the case of a merchant generator developer, if they obtain their permits, build their facility, and then somehow lapse in their obligations under a permit, under an Act 250 permit, how does that affect their contract with whoever they're selling the electricity to? Sounds like it would not affect it.
Well, it would. That might be a better question for the PUC. There may be, if it was approved contingent on having this permit.
Well, that's it. Is the contingent, right? So
right.
People ask the PUC,
but
okay, that's fine. I think that it's a question to be asked, further.
Yeah. Okay. The goal, I think, is to just not have the overlapping jurisdiction. And I think as it's written, that is how I read it, is that the commission needs to make sure that it has Act 250 permit. But right. I just, that was most of what I came to say. I want to add two things based on the conversation. As far as, the FERC notice of proposed rulemaking that, as Loyal mentioned, FERC has not announced anything yet, or the DOE request that FERC do the rulemaking. FERC has not announced anything yet, but in meetings regionally and with some FERC commissioners, the word is that FERC is not going to actually do a rulemaking. They're going to decline to do that. They had tons of public comments, including by New England, with Vermont participating as part of that, saying back off on state's jurisdiction. Instead, what it appears they may do is there's a provision of law that will allow them to ask ISO New England to show how their tariff allows for large load interconnections. And so ISO New England now has a tariff that, they may need to update it a little bit, that allows for load interconnections. And I would see that being as the next step of the process is ISO New England, FERC saying, hey, show us that you have the ability to interconnect large loads, just structurally, not necessarily like enough generation, et cetera, but just structurally the process is there. And ISO New England would say, here's the process for that. Their process doesn't, I think they would need to update some of their tariff and their processes in order to meet that and say, here's how we do this. Right now, it's expected that they would follow the same procedures as a generator locating in New England, where they have a large interconnection study and they ensure the system stays reliable. That with the change to the system, that would be these large loads. And so it's a little confusing, but it's not. I don't think it's not as bad as a federal rulemaking saying we have jurisdiction and you'll pay this rate and that'll be fine. And it's potentially good in that New England in its own grid could have one system and clarify like the actual interconnection process.
Jake, are the New England states generally aligned in their thinking in this regard?
Yeah, I think so. It's always we can be aligned in discussions and then things change a little bit as we go back. But it's, in our discussions in NESCO, the New England States Committee on Electricity, we have shared some principles for large load. And, there are a lot of things that are actually in this legislation, things like making sure that other ratepayers are unharmed, making sure you're dealing with stranded costs of, if a data center comes and causes infrastructure upgrades and then bails, that they're still paying for it, exit fees or what have you. There's discussions around bring your own generation. There's transparency. One of the things I wanted to comment on that Mr. Walsh brought up was transparency. And in some, I don't know a lot of the details, but in some other jurisdictions outside of New England, there were, as I understand it, there were instances where a utility entered into a contract with a data center. They don't have the same regulatory framework as we do, so keep that in mind. But that regulators and the public advocates actually weren't allowed to see the terms of the contract, and that is not appropriate. We oppose that and would be happy to talk about how to ensure that there's no, I think our processes are pretty good and wouldn't allow that now, but I'm happy to ensure that that is the case as we go forward in this bill. And so that's one of the things I think look forward to more discussions on that. So
how would we, I was really curious about that too. And maybe that is a PUC question, but so say there's this contract and PUC is reviewing it. Is that a public process, and does the contract become public?
So I think the answer is yes, although there may be certain provisions of the contract that are held confidential, but it would have to be shown for cause to hold it confidential. But it's confidential within the construct of parties of the case that have an interest. Those can still see it. And so there's a few layers to it that one, you wouldn't be able to sign an NDA that precludes the commission, ratepayer advocate, interveners that have the interest in the area from seeing those. And, you know, you wouldn't want one, it wouldn't extend so far as like Microsoft being able to see Google's contract, right? But it would extend to those who have shown standing in the case on that issue to be able to see the contract. And that's typical of contracts we have now and just regulatory processes across the board. And so I think we would design language to kind of really ensure that that is the case on this large load service equity contract to the extent that it isn't already covered in law. So
In the Senate.
yes, that would be the goal. And so I think there's a lot of alignment there. I don't think that is going to be particularly controversial, honestly, but you should bring in a data center developer. They may have. The other thing I just kind of wanted to mention, the self-managed utility concept. So that is in statute now. If you hook in at 115 kV, like at the transmission level, you can, as you get approval through what would be like a year-long process at the PUC, you can be a self-managed utility. And you need to meet a number of certain criteria, but then that utility would need to then contract. It would be its own entity, and then the data center would be the load and be the customer. And so the SMU, the self-managed utility, becomes the retail electric distribution utility. And then they have the contract with the data center, which would then need to follow this large load service equity contract. And I think that in particular, especially as I say it right now, is really the area where we want to make sure that that contract, the commission and all the appropriate entities can review that, right? Because they're close to each other, right? It's like GF Power and Global Foundries as an example. And so, I think I just wanted to clarify that process because I think the conversation largely got there, but I kind of wanted to recap it and be succinct into that would be the process. Somebody asked earlier, why not a tariff, just a general tariff? And that was the kind of the original structure of like PUC sets up tariffs for everybody. I think this construct of the contract is more appropriate because it's each of these are going to be unique based on their size, their implications, where they locate on the grid, what the infrastructure necessary to build is, and there was one other thing but they're unique. And so I think that serves this structure well, where they propose that contract that meets these requirements in terms of their retail service, and we can each one will be approved on its own. If you just had a tariff, a number of different, you could have 4 of them just say, yep, I want to join this tariff, I meet the requirements, and we're off. And I mean, you could design the tariff and put legislative requirements on a tariff also, but it would be kind of the one size fits all for what I think will be unique instances in each data center.
I wanted to make sure I understood about the self-managed utility. So you said in the case of Global Foundries, and I didn't follow that super closely. So there's Global Foundries and now there's GF Power. It's like a separate company or a
Right,
totally separate company.
right.
So if just using that as an example, or so we'd have data center and data power.
Right.
Yeah.
And the contract would be between data center and its spinoff or separate company, data power. And we want to make sure, do you think it's unclear in this bill that that contract would have to go through the same
No, I think that's
approval
clear.
process?
I think
Okay,
that's clear in this bill.
okay.
It's the transparency aspect,
Right,
the importance of the transparency.
Like who
aspect.
sees it?
right.
But I thought we just talked about it.
Yes, that's what I think. I was raising that construct in particular would be a really critical one to make sure that the commission and the department and, you know, interveners with standing can actually review the terms that the critical terms. I think most of it can be public, and then there's certain, like, you know, things that might be competitively sensitive. There are other laws around that require confidentiality, but it's confidentiality, but the commission and department and others need to be able to still have a line to see into that in order to know whether it meets the requirements to bill. And so just some language on transparency to be developed in the Senate, I think, could really clarify that and make sure that we don't get into a situation that happened in other jurisdictions, as I understand it, that they couldn't see that.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
So as it's written now, does the department have automatic standing to look at this? To fully see what the contract is?
Yes, and what we would need to, yes. Yeah, there's like steps that we have to go through. They would have to assert confidentiality, and we would have to say, we won't share it with anybody. And then it ultimately gets protected under Vermont's public records law. And so then it's protected that way. But yes, we can
just
get our
just more
access.
generally in this process, regardless of you have visibility into this whole process.
Yes.
Just yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted, I don't remember seeing it specifically in the language. I just wanted to make sure that the department, right, had proper standing.
Thank you. Yes, we do. We do. And it's not in this language. It's in the, just the whole of the Title 30. And
Yeah.
And the Public Utility Commission has jurisdiction to decide whether an assertion of confidentiality is appropriate.
yes.
That
Yep. I think I may have said the last thing before, but really the last thing, just because it's in here and added, I support the language on the report being added. I also support what Ms. Morgan suggested and kind of removing some of the specificity and having it be more flexible for the people seeing.
Thanks, TJ.
Thank you.
Right.
You're next in the line. Next. Good afternoon, folks. For the record, Greg Faber with the PUC. So I originally just planned to come here and talk about section 4, but I guess we should talk about the stuff on page 5. So beginning on line 9 of line 9, page 5. It has us, the commission has required, shall find that blah, 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 data center will meet various conditions. Okay, and the first one starts on line 19 now. Adversely affect efficiency and reliability, that's fine. Economic benefit to the state, it's fine. But then you get to number 3, and that's at the top of page 6. These are the citing criteria for section 248. that involves actually citing something physically. Okay, we're not citing anything physically here. We're just looking at a service contract, right? So this language is not necessary. You probably want to keep 4 and 5; those are fine. But 6 through 12, 3, 6 through 12 should be gone. Those are all citing criteria. We are not doing any citings. If you want to put something in that says the data center shall obtain an Act 250 permit as a condition, we did that. You did. I didn't see it here, but that would be fine. That would suffice for all of this.
Did that, right?
Yeah, it's,
You have Act 250 requirement, but it was a question is whether or not you need to have this language in here or not. Given that there's the Act 250 review, I think that's what Greg is getting at.
Right. You don't want us doing a citing review on something that Act 250 is already doing a citing review on.
Mhm.
Brings
So,
us to the, sorry.
sorry, I just want to understand which specific lines are
Okay,
the
starting on
248 citing criteria.
that is starting on line 1 of page 6.
So the whole subsection 3,
Subsection 3 should be gone.
except for the greenhouse gas requirement.
You can leave the greenhouse gas. That's something different.
Okay, so everything from line 1 through 7
Yeah.
is the Act 248 citing requirements that is going to be covered by Act 250,
Right.
except for line 8.
Mhm.
Okay,
And then 4 and 5, that's something unique to us, so you might want to leave those. It's really not citing, that's more of a
yeah,
that goes well with a contract. But then 6 through 12, that's all citing stuff. Air pollution, outstanding resource orders, all that fun stuff.
No, I don't.
not all of it.
Or decommissioning would be.
Well, I'm assuming that Act 250 is going to look at decommissioning. We're not looking at the actual site. Again, we're not looking at the actual building. What are we decommissioning? We have a service contract. So if you want to make them look at decommissioning, go for it. And I'm not sure what their decommissioning requirements are. I assume they have them. I'm pretty sure they do. But
They, meaning Act 250.
yes. We have nothing to decommission. We are not commissioning anything. We are looking at a service contract.
Yeah.
Between a distribution utility and a data center.
So 6 through 12.
Yeah.
That's can be served economically by existing or planned transmission facilities. That's an Act 250.
You could leave that one, I guess.
And if we step back to the earlier question,
State energy efficiency requirements, including CBs, that's not Act 250.
State energy efficiency requirements. I mean, they would certainly look at that.
Madam Chair.
I think it is Act 250.
Yeah, the Act 250, it's within criteria 9, but it requires best available technology, and they've the commercial building energy standards has been used to meet that criterion. So I think that would be the same as what's here in provision 10.
now there's the previous question we had about whether our intent is for the PUC to do all this stuff or just to confirm that all this stuff is in the contract.
Mhm.
And
To confirm that they have an Act 250 permit
That addresses this.
that addresses these things, right? Isn't that
Yeah, well, this
what we're going for here? We want to confirm. We want the PUC to confirm that they have an Act 250 permit.
You could certainly say that. Just make.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're not sweeping through and kind of. We've put so much time into making sure that we're not missing anything.
Right.
So I don't want to just kind of at the last minute here, knock out a page full of text that we haven't gone through carefully. So I just want to make sure that we're covering our bases since that's been our whole point.
Right.
So, so if our intent is to make sure that the project has an Act 250 permit and the PUC confirms that, what would the timing of that be? That kind of gets to my earlier
Well,
question for
you had asked
TJ.
about timing. You could
Yeah.
say, you could make it a requirement that the entity data center has an Act 250 permit in hand. And then obviously that would set the timing. They'd have to get that first before they come to us, if that's what you want to do. I mean, TJ's right. This could go in. This could happen at the same time. Someone could be seeking a service contract approval at the same time they're seeking Act 250 approval of the build. But if you want to set the time standard, the schedule, you can do that. You can say before they come to us, they've got to have their Act 250 permit in hand.
Wouldn't that save you time?
We ordinarily wouldn't look at the Act 250 permit, but if you wanted us to look at it, obviously they would have to have it.
Right.
So
Because that
obviously it's up to
parallel
you.
process sounds like a waste of your time if,
No, we're just looking at the service contract. We're not looking at the siting. We're not looking at the same things that Act 250 is looking at in that case.
yeah, what I meant was, why would you spend time reviewing a contract? If they're gonna
Oh,
have
if they never get approval for the building, yeah, that's true. And the same goes the other way as well. Obviously, they can't get a service contract approved. They're not going to build something, or
Mhm. What do you guys think?
So
250 in hand. Sounds good to me.
So that means A&R permits, all your water permits before you get then you get your Act 250 permit. Then you go for your
zoning as well. Remember that?
zoning.
That's fine. Yeah.
Then you go for your service contract.
Yes. Once all that's out of the way, then you try and get a service contract.
So going back to what this whole section is about, this whole section, starting on page 5, this isn't, so my interpretation was that the stuff that the PUC would make sure was in the contract. Actually, it's the PUC approval, I guess, of this section is sort of a question for Maria.
Yes.
So there's two lists of items for the PUC. For the PUC, one is a list of terms that need to be addressed in the contract. That's the first list starting on the page. That is page 2. And the second is starting on page 5 is these things that need to be in place in order for the PUC to approve the contract.
Yes, sort of. They're findings that the PUC has to make
Okay.
before it approves, in order to approve. So it would have to find just at the bottom of page 5.
Yeah.
That this contract with all of these provisions.
Yeah.
Will not adversely affect. So they're findings. If you want to say they got their Act 250 permit, like these are findings.
Yeah. Okay. So it seems like the language just needs to be a little bit clearer about that early. I don't know. Maybe I misinterpreted it, I think, before. So maybe it should fall in, but
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
At the risk of really complicating things, I mean, I'm worried about having to get your Act 250 permit first.
Why?
Like with your water permits and other things, you need those before you get your Act. It's kind of like Act 250 is like the last thing. Like you've dealt with all the stuff you need to deal with. And there is some energy items there are some energy items in there. So it seems like it would make
to not specify.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it makes sense to specify. 250 would probably be last. Just as a matter of course, like they're gonna require all these things to come in. One thing I want to make sure, so something that's very important to me, I know it's important to other members of this committee, and I appreciate your help or direction on this. The decommissioning aspect. So I hear you, but we need that to happen. And so do you have a recommendation on where that should happen or who should be in charge of making sure that that happens?
Yeah.
So, I mean, is it the DU and the data center? Like, so this is talking about,
This is the data center itself.
The
This is basically
facility.
citing it. So really that needs to happen at the Act 250 level. For the building, the actual physical building.
Mhm,
You know, if there's a generation facility, obviously we're going to be involved in that.
mhm,
We have decommissioning standards.
mhm.
And I'm pretty sure Act 250 has decommissioning standards as well, but you should check with them. And if you need to shore that up, I suggest you do so. But it would be with them at that point, not us.
So this may be something that needs to get taken care of as this bill moves along into the next chamber.
Yep.
Jim, PUC decommissioning standards for generation facilities include a requirement that the generator provide funds, put money aside in order to do that.
Yep. Surety bonds usually,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So that seems like that would be appropriate here, I guess.
Again, we're not approving anything physical here. This is.
No, I
just
know.
a-
I'm just talking about in general, not that
Oh, I see.
there would be a PUD requirement. I'm just thinking, on the other hand, how many building developments require that you include a bond for the cost of deconstruction? Probably not. So, that's, but we have to,
That is something you're gonna have to take up with Act 250.
yeah.
You're right. Are there normally decommissioning standards for buildings? I doubt it.
Yeah, right.
So.
Right.
I don't know.
Got some in your rear view mirror.
Just wanted to revisit the transparency issue. Sure. Can you confirm that Mr. Bohr's understanding was accurate regarding the public nature of this contract?
Oh, yeah, he explained it very well. I mean, sometimes people ask for confidential treatment of various pieces of evidence, and we deal with that as a matter of course.
But otherwise, it's a public document.
Sure. Yeah.
And I just want to make sure I'm clear, Greg, going back to page 6 and 7.
Mhm.
So you had originally said 6 through 12,
Right.
but I think we've changed that.
Yep.
So I think that 7, 10, and 11.
Well, 10, as TJ explained, the
Oh, that's
theory
50,
looks at
7 and
so,
11.
Yeah, 7 and 11. I guess 11. Yeah, sure. Why not?
11 on page 7.
So
Well, that would
Yeah.
be, I mean, no,
Page 7.
that also would be.
And that pertains to a contract, sure.
Yes. Um, in terms of an electric company on page 2, line 18, that was flagged earlier as possibly meaning that the self-managed utility could contract. Could you just explain how that does the self-managed utility process involve 248 so that the PUC is handling the same?
It wouldn't include 248. That's the siting requirements. So applying to be a self-managed utility is a totally separate process from 248. You're already in existence at that point. Like Global Foundries.
They already,
They're existed, then they say, hey, you want to be a utility.
okay. So you don't have any concerns about this
No,
being
I agree with TJ. It's covered.
covered?
Yeah.
We have more questions for Greg, or Greg, did you have another?
Oh, yeah, section 4, I just wanted to, say that we agree with, I don't know if you're gonna get that, we agree with Miss Morgan's testimony there. This is basically the, report. And you know how we love doing reports.
Heard.
Yeah, so we had conversations with DMT and, we agreed to basically stop this sentence or stop this first paragraph, starting at line 6. At line 10, just putting a period after 2035. We'd also agreed on pushing the date back to this, to January of 2027, January 15, 2027. Under those conditions, we can do this report. Yeah, so we support that as well.
And B has no problems.
With
Stakeholder process, yeah.
Yeah, based on those conditions, we're fine with it. Yeah, and that's it, really.
So going back to page 6. In subsection 3, you would recommend that we have it simply say, since these are the 248 siting criteria, will not have an undue adverse effect on the attainment of the state's greenhouse gas emissions reduction requirements.
Yeah,
Did I hear that right?
yes, I think that's the right
Okay,
language.
and then 4, you'd like us to keep. 5, you would like us to keep.
Yep.
7, we already struck.
No, 7 you wanted.
7 is struck.
7's out.
First,
Seven on the next page.
oh, yeah, okay, that,
6.
yeah,
Outstanding.
he wants that out. We don't, again, that's a physical siting thing. Stuff located next to water.
So this is part of the A&R permitting process.
Yes, A&R and Act 250.
Okay. 7, that doesn't feel
That's fine.
Act 250-ish.
That pertains to a contract.
8.
8 and 9 are clearly A&R and stuff.
10.
It depends also, that's CVs and that's covered under Act 250 permit.
Our environmental justice law,
That's fine. If you want us to look at that,
somebody should.
why not? We'll look at it as part of the contract. That makes sense because it could have financial impacts. So that makes sense.
So who should assess if decommissioning is adequate? You're saying that should be, who should
The
assess?
person who's approving the actual structure, which would be Act 250 in this case.
Okay.
Because again, we're just looking at the contract. So decommissioning of what at that point?
So what if we were to include here in 12, if we were to take out adequately accounts for potential and just left fine, well, so it's a box you check. There's a decommissioning for the facility in here.
Something, yes, something along the lines of the Act 250 program adequately addresses decommissioning or something like that. Is that what you're?
Yes, that would be great. Does that?
Yeah, you should talk to them about it though, because
We will, but I mean, this is really this.
We could check that box though. We could say, yes, they have a decommissioning agreement that was approved by Act 250.
So, I'm thinking about the decommissioning fund that I'm aware of and for Vermont Yankee.
Oh, yeah, we have a lot of them.
Okay.
We have tons. Every solar facility that goes in has a decommissioning.
And that's
except for the small ones.
And that is for what? For getting rid of the solar panels?
Yeah. Yeah. All the wind turbines.
Yeah.
They all have decommissioning funds.
And so
restoring the site to the ground.
I'm going to ask for your patience here.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a simple question. I might need it as a
I'm good
sixth grader.
Yeah.
Sixth grade explanation. So explain to me the difference between data center and the solar panels and, providing for the decommissioning. I mean, I know one's a building and one is.
One's energy.
Oh, why are we not doing decommissioning funds for buildings? Is that?
No, why are you
I mean,
doing
it's
it for solar panels? I think we're trying to understand the difference.
Yeah, and it's not just like it's a bill. It's not like it's a a Walgreens. I mean, it's a huge energy load user.
Right. I'm just not sure how Act 250 treats those kind of things. Do they normally ask for decommissioning on that? I don't know.
But you guys have experience significant experience in decommissioning.
Generators.
For generation facilities. Yep.
But
I mean, this is a unicorn, which is a lot that uses a lot of energy.
Right. But again, keep in mind, we're not even, so in those solar facilities, we're looking at the whole project. We're looking at all of the evidence submitted for constructing that project. Here, that building has nothing to do with our review of a service contract. So now you're asking us to step over to the other side and look at a decommissioning contract. We're going to have to look at all of the projects. So we don't have any of that evidence. We haven't had a hearing. We don't know what's going on there. Nor do we care because we're really just focused on that service contract.
So we have big concerns around energy usage and the costs associated with making transmission. We have big concerns with water and potential impacts on the environment. And so, is there some other equivalent that you can think of that would be helpful for us to think about in terms of?
Could that be addressed if there's zoning in that town? To obtain a zoning permit, can they require that?
Can the town require a decommissioning?
With zoning?
I am.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah. So I'm a little nervous about the negotiations happening between some of these entities in a small Vermont town.
Yeah, that's fine. I just trying to think outside the box and how it could be accomplished.
Yeah, no, agreed.
I think the question we're starting with here is what do we decommission? In the case of a generation facility, it's all the stuff that is associated with the generation facility. In the case of a load facility, there isn't the same impact, except for the water thing, which could be a huge impact, or depending on how they cool it. If it's not water, how they whatever the cooling is. So I don't know. I don't know what we're trying to do here. So that's what I'm asking.
Would you like to read the Act 250 decommissioning language?
Yes.
Vermont Act 250 requires decommissioning plans for major developments, particularly energy projects, to ensure sites are returned to a stable, safe, and productive condition after use. Requirements typically include restoring soil, vegetation, removing infrastructure, and providing financial assurance for cleanup, often mandated under criteria regarding aesthetic, historic, and environmental impacts. And then there's more
Right.
under that.
What criteria you got?
The search is under. Remember, it's in the kind of preamble. And there's a complete list.
So it's not a specific criteria.
So we could confirm with Brooke and Peter that decommissioning is gonna be covered by Act 250. Yeah.
And, I think one question is, what does a decommissioned data center, what do we want it to look like when it's fully decommissioned? Do we want the building taken down, the slab removed and all that? Or can the building stay if it's useful to someone? And they get all the toxic stuff out, all the electronics and the cooling system, like the decommissioning mean getting all that stuff out of there, but leaving the structure.
Yeah. If they can find another use for a building, have this square footage in the
location
in Vernon, Vermont, where there's a water source. And I don't know how many square feet we're talking about a building, but I guess it'd be condominiumized for manufacturing or whatever. But yeah, so to remove the toxins, to remove any, be it chips or be it coolant or stuff, and it's there in 250.
So I suggest that we just reassure ourselves with Brooke and Peter.
Yep.
Because there's no best practices to be looking at really in terms of data center decommissioning. So this would be an emerging area of policy.
But I think what Alan suggested this makes some sense. I'm not, again, it's unique to this particular building type, but if we're moving everything down to a bare building, something like that, it would be.
You could have the provisions to remove the concrete, the whole building.
Good.
But if somebody found a use for the building that's left, it's like buying the old car frame to restore.
Yeah.
They could, and if they do it, that's there's still the assurance is the money's there to bring it back to farmland or soil if needed. If they find some other use, would there not be review for an amendment of an Act 250 if they just decided not to bring it down to soil?
Okay.
So I think we can, if we're considering striking some of these sections, then I think we can just send a quick email to Lurb and just ask them to provide some written testimony on how decommissioning would be handled under an Act 250 permit.
I would like us to leave in that as part of the contract, you'll check the box that there is a decommissioning plan. I mean, because that will indicate to others that is an expectation from the legislature that.
Sure. Well, I just want to take half a step back. The purpose of decommissioning is to make sure the community doesn't get burdened with the costs of getting rid of something that the community doesn't want.
Yeah.
And I agree that could in fact include the building of the slab, although it pains my sense of efficiency for someone to spend a bunch of money pouring a slab and building a building just to rip it down.
Especially an energy efficient one, because we're required.
Yeah.
But I can imagine, as Rep. Howland pointed out, there may be communities that have a data center and there's like no current economical use for that structure and they'd rather turn it into forest or whatever they want to do.
I don't think we're gonna figure out the details of that.
Nope.
Yeah.
So,
So,
so, okay. and
One
we'll take a
example
break.
here is, we're talking about a data center that brings all sorts of construction people in to build it. But once they're built, they very few employees.
Yeah.
But when you convert that, whatever the square footage is, to further use, now you've got all this traffic control of bringing in thousands of workers to work in tens of thousands of square foot buildings. So I think we cover it with the provisions we have.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Faber, for coming to talk to us.
Sure. So,
Let's, yeah, is Peter here? Oh, Peter, oh my gosh.
she survived it.
Thanks, Greg.
He was hanging out on some mountaintop.
Forgot about Peter. Hi, totally forgot about you. I'm sorry.
I did not, Peter. I just want that for the record.
I appreciate the fact that it'd be pretty easy to forget about me sitting here on the screen. So, and not a big deal. For the record, Peter Walk, Managing Director of Efficiency Vermont. Thanks for the opportunity to be here with you today. It's been an interesting conversation. Lots of parts of it that I don't have to weigh in on, though I do think your suggestion that checking in with the LURB is probably the best way to go about your decommissioning question, because they do that stuff all the time, and to not overthink it in the legislative context. As it relates to the energy efficiency discussion, and we had suggested two pieces the last time we talked about this bill. The first one was around a prohibition around participation in SMEEP, ESA, and the other programs. I think that makes sense to me. Then I appreciate that you've included that in there. I think primarily from the perspective of ideally, right, and this relates to the other provision that we've been talking about, is the idea that they would come and do energy efficiency work up front, right? We do this all the time with large new facilities. It's the best opportunity to get the efficiency work done. We'll provide them with an incentive. They can move from what is code to what is better than code, and really make a meaningful difference to the energy drive or energy draw on the grid. And so that's a very positive piece. That said, they won't yet have paid into the energy efficiency charge before the building is built. And so to then allow them to use their own funds or their own EEC contributions to then fund additional work seems inappropriate. So I think the way you've worded it is great. The one piece I did want to add is the sort of separate section that you've created on energy efficiency and the requirement that they work with Efficiency Vermont. I think there's an opportunity to probably make that a little bit clearer. And I understand you're running, up against the clock, and this is something that could easily be fixed on the Senate side. I'm happy to have conversations with stakeholders about it. But essentially, the way the wording is, it looks like you want folks to come in to talk to Efficiency Vermont about their obligations to meet code. And I don't think that's what you mean. I think you want them to have the most efficient building they possibly can, because we fund above code for the most part. And they're going to have that obligation under Act 250 and other pieces in the bill around meeting code. So I think one of the things that I was discussing with some of the other stakeholders was the idea of, you already have language around requiring them to implement demand management and kind of flexible load management work as part of, I think it's 284. Let me get the reference up. In section 284B8, in that requirement, we could add language that said energy efficiency and demand management work. What we'd originally suggested in language was to have, essentially do the efficiency work in combination between the relevant EEU, right? Because it's not all Efficiency Vermont coverage, and the appropriate DU is involved. But that isn't I think the language that you have now sets the right signal, and I think it's clear what you're trying to do. I think there could be some strengthening to make it more effective. But I also am happy to do that with your colleagues on the Senate side, if that is your preference.
Thank you, Peter, and sorry for the confusion on that language.
That's quite all right. I think I in some ways it makes sense to but I think it just doesn't perfectly align with how things work and under existing statute and regulatory pieces. So it's just a little bit of clarification would be helpful.
Well, do you have suggested language? We are going to be making changes to this draft.
He does, but it is language that is not agreed upon by all stakeholders.
Senate question.
Okay.
Yep. And we'll work with those stakeholders who have some concerns. I think the way the language has evolved in different drafts, there are some, I'd rather not create another standalone piece. I'd rather integrate it with the work that we're already requiring. So I think it makes sense to spend the time to get that right. If that's helpful.
All right. Great. Thanks, Peter.
Of course.
And yeah, appreciate your time. Maria, I am curious if you know what we're doing.
I have noticed.
Or should we have we have floor, unfortunately, in like 9 minutes, so we need to.
Sure. Well, so I don't know what I missed before I got here. I know I got an email about some suggested language, and then I've kind of been following this, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I can meet with a couple of you, or we can talk now, whatever you want to do.
I don't think we have time now. I just want to make sure we know what the plan is, because we've got, I think, a lot of small suggestions now. I'm not sure what the Environment Committee is going to be recommending to us or when. We didn't hear from ANR yet, although I know they're really involved in the bill in the Environment Committee. But we were supposed to hear from them today. We didn't. I don't think Billy got back to, I'm not sure what happened. But anyway, and then I want to be really thoughtful about what we do on page 6 and 7. And
Yes. So one thing I think we do know is the report.
The report's easy.
Yeah, and I think that
easy.
language was sent to you.
Yeah. Yeah, Brett Southworth.
One quick thing on page 4 and number 7, 113, include collateral requirements sufficient to mitigate the risk of stranded costs. That's falling under the large load service equity contracts. Can that be construed as including decommissioning? I know we talked about that before, but I think we're hung up on where that language on decommissioning can be put. And if it can be covered under that, then it's a non-issue.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's a great question. If maybe decommissioning could be under that, but as it is, but I think if you want to be more specific and has a plan for decommissioning in the event that becomes necessary, or I would add that here if you want it to be part of the contract between the utility and the data center, if you do want that. And then you're not, it's just part of their contract. They have to agree who's going to be responsible if there has to be.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. See where that could fit in.
And this might be a public service department question, but don't the contractors pay, don't they have to pay up front for what the utility has to invest? That's the electricity code. So and this has been a rule for a long time, so that the utility didn't have stranded costs. But I agree to leave it in there.
Okay. All right, let's go off live.
So,
Gotta go.
uh,